It's the People's Voice on the Community Channel on TVU with your host, Adam Stevenson, the conservative commentator. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing pretty good, James. I'm doing pretty good. It's a beautiful sunny day. We got an extra special guest today. Her name's Bubba Kate Paris. She's from the United Kingdom. She is the former director of the United Kingdom Independence Party, also known as UKIP. They're a fairly well-known party over there. They were very heavily involved in the Brexit movement and that sort of thing. And if you just want to take a second to introduce yourself there, Kate, that'd be great.
Yes, good afternoon to all the viewers out there. My name is Katie Elizabeth Fanning, aka Bubba Kate Paris, as I'm known online. As Stephen's just said, that I used to be a director of UKIP. I'm now a bit politically homeless due to having only two options here in the UK, one being very far left wing and the other being quite left wing, the Conservative and Labour Party, meaning that we don't really have much option, but we are hoping to change that soon. So I'm online today to talk about some of the important topics that are affecting not just my country, but your country as well, as this seems to be going on in all free Western liberal democracies. But I'll let your host introduce the topics and we'll go from there. But thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on. What's our first topic, James?
I was waiting for you guys to just skip right into the first one. You're doing so good. So let me get my
defensive monuments, correct?
Sorry, man. Made me get my cell phone. Right. Okay, we're talking about there's several things that came up for a discussion: defensive monuments, Black Lives Matters, the Marxist and Islamic roots within that organization, anti-white racism, and patriotism. And you know what, where I'd like to come through to begin with, because I think that all these other things are symptomatic of where you really stand, Kate. And I'd like to start with patriotism, if I could.
Well, patriotism in the UK is now seen as something that's negative. If you fly the British flag, that's supposed to be a sign of white supremacy. If we try and celebrate St. George's Day, you're labelled a racist. And particularly recently, we've had our own Prime Minister who labelled our veterans that were defending our war memorials from the BLM, Black Lives Matter, terrorists. And that's the way that I see them, is domestic terrorists that are running a Marxist coup on our country currently and using a smokescreen of imaginary racism to do so. And in Britain, we do have an awful lot of patriotic people. However, they're not allowed to voice their views in any manner. In fact, they're very scared to do so, because as soon as anybody voices anything that talks about Britishness, British identity, the indigenous white British population that are systematically being racially abused in this country, and that's very rarely talked about. We have a very one-way media that doesn't like to point anything that is patriotic in a great light. They always think, these lager-lout, low IQ racists, that are basically want to push all these horrible things that nobody's really ever said. There is no far right in the UK. If there are, it's a very, very small percentage. But anything that disagrees with the far left agenda, like, multiple genders, for example, or identity politics, or the Islamification of the UK, if you speak about these things, then suddenly you are classed as a racist. So patriotism in the UK has almost become they've broadened these terms of racism and patriotism and even nationalism, and they've almost combined them and attributed the negative traits of racism to nationalism and to patriotism. But it's okay for all of the people to be able to celebrate their cultures in Britain, but we're not allowed to celebrate our own. And I think that's been going on for a very long time, and that's what's led up to this sort of allowance of the Black Lives Matter movement, which is completely unacceptable in its actions. I mean, if you compare what they're doing today to what was going on in Nazi Germany, of forcibly silencing people, of violently attacking people that oppose them, of saying that we should boycott the businesses of the target race in in this case, it tends to be white people, but they've also been going after Jewish people, Sikh people, and even Black and ethnic minority people that don't go along with their Marxist agenda. You know, they call them Uncle Toms and racially abuse them because their lives don't matter. Black lives only matter if you're going along with the Marxist coup of this country. You can read it yourself on the Black Lives Matter website and on their funding pages what their full agenda is. And, you know, it's things like destruction of the nuclear family. Well, that's gone really well for the Black community, hasn't it? You know, fatherlessness. But why would you want to be pushing that? You know, it's just ridiculous. It really is. But
I just want to get Adam.
It's basically been demonized in the UK. Even flying your flag or saying that you're proud to be British is seen as something really negative, as if, you know, being proud of being British and vocalizing it is somehow attacking other people.
Well, you know what, I want to let you know that you know, Canadians are proud of their British heritage and our connection to the UK. Adam, let's start with patriotism. What's your input from a Canadian point of view, from an Albertan?
Oh yeah,
right? Because things are shifting here, right?
Exactly. I feel like I agree with her on a lot of points. Things are essentially the same here in Canada. Patriotism seems to be frowned upon these days. People are called racist for caring about their country and their national identity. But it's a little bit more complicated over here in the sense that we are not the indigenous population in this country. So that adds a little bit of a different dynamic to it, right? But we are still seeing a lot of the same anti-white racism, Black Lives Matter pushing their Marxist ideology, and like she said, I was just on the Black Lives Matter website the other day checking for myself, and it says right on there that part of their agenda is to dismantle the nuclear family, right? There's undercover videos that were found by Project Veritas that caught the leader, the founder of Black Lives Matter, saying on camera that we are trained Marxists.
Okay, hold on.
Right.
So, okay, Marxism, I understand, but anyways, I don't want to go too much deeper into patriotism. Let's move along. Don't you think that these things that you're talking about, the Black Lives Matters, the Marxist roots and Islamic roots and anti-white racism, don't you think that they're more of a sign of greater waves, you know, greater historical waves that we're not even really conscious of, and we're just seeing the sparks?
100%. I think that there's been a lot of ideological subversion.
Let's hear from Kate. Let's hear from Kate first. She's our guest.
Well, I think that, yes, it is on a much bigger scale, because at the roots of all of this is, at the core, is globalization. That's why they wish to dismantle nation states. I mean, that is what the UN is, in my opinion. It is the public face of what is the aspiring one world government. I mean, and what I think people have got to be looking at is the fact that China, due to its Belt and Road initiatives and its debt trap diplomacy, actually has around 70% of the world in its pocket, and it uses those votes in the UN to sway things. Now, China still is, you know, ruled by the Chinese Communist Party, and they've made no secret of wanting to be the world's predominant economic and military superpower by 2049, and they're well on their way to doing so. And I believe that what we've got is actually a purposefully made disruption, civil disruptions to weaken nations. I mean, if we're busy fighting each other on our own doorsteps, it's going to be very difficult to group together and fight a threat, isn't it? You know, 10 years down the line. And I think that the UN and China and other Marxist organizations, they include people, the insidious rot within, as I call them, within our own governments and our own institutions that are working towards this agenda as well. I mean, this is why the media post a lot of anti-white race, you know, anti-white propaganda, but yet they're always telling blacks that they are marginalized and they are you know, systematically racially abused in the system, when there is really no evidence to prove that. But they want to get them angry, And then when they do things like this, then the white community get angry and everybody else gets angry. So we're all angry at each other. So it makes it a lot easier to dominate and subvert a people that are arguing amongst themselves. And I do believe that this is a globalist agenda. That's why we're not just seeing it in Great Britain and the United States and Canada. You're seeing it everywhere. And I think that people have got to look beyond the scope of their own nation, because I think that all of this does intertwine together towards a one world globalist plot to dismantle all free open democracies with equal rights. And what we will end up with, if people keep playing into their hands, is living in a one world Marxist government. And if Black Lives Matter seem to think that the Marxists are on their side, they're not. They believed in eugenics. And if you want to get any idea of how China treats Black people, look at how they treated them when the pandemic started. They kicked them out of their homes and banned them from public spaces. And in Africa, China's gone in there and basically bought everything up. They're stripping them of their national resources, taking everything from them. But you don't hear anything about that. And the Chinese are highly racist. They've got to understand that these Marxists, they don't just hate us and hate the Jews. They hate everybody who's not them. And they're trying to turn us all against each other. And yes, all of this does fit in together. The anti-white racism, Black Lives Matter, the destruction of monuments, it all comes out of the totalitarian handbook. Okay, I mean, I don't know why people aren't seeing it for what it is.
I think they do, but I think they're just a little afraid. Adam, what do you think are the greater global or even historical trends? Even the people that are involved in these global kind of machinations, they're subject to historical trends. What do you see?
Well, I definitely see the historical trends that are connected to this tends to be, like I was trying to say before, is a gradual ideological subversion that's happened over several generations, right? If you look at the 1960s, when these sorts of things started happening, these sorts of movements, several different movements started, the feminist movement, the gay rights movement, all of these things. And not that I'm not for women's rights or I'm not for gay people having their rights, but the thing is that that's when those things started, and they've slowly been ideologically subverging our society from one generation to the next. And it started with sort of the light version. And then those people, they grew up and they became the teachers and they became the lawyers and they became the judges. And then they had another chance over the next 20 years to do it with a second generation. And then we're coming to the end of the third generation now. Right? And generally, historically, this is what Marxists do, right? They ideologically subvert a nation away from its traditional values, the underpinning that holds that civilization together, and they chip away at it through ideological subversion over 2 to 3 generations. And by the time you come to the end of the third generation, everybody is so well, not everyone, but a large enough portion of the population is so ideologically subverged that you could show them truth and factual evidence to their face, and they suffer from nothing but cognitive dissonance, and they won't even admit to the facts that are presented directly in front of them. For example, the fact that, let's take police on black violence, for example, right? A black male is 71 times more likely to be shot by another black male than he is to be shot by a police officer of any skin color.
You've offered these stats before. They're compelling. Yeah. They're compelling, but they're pinning down some spots of the conversation that I just don't want to go there today, since we have Kate here. Okay,
so
we're talking
FBI crime statistics.
I know they're all great and they're all right, but to me they're symptomatic of greater trends. All right. Oh, yeah, so right. Now the evaporation. Family. I'm with you, and I understand, and I totally agree, because we're all conservative in the sense that we were raised in nuclear families, and we feel good about them, and we see the wisdom and strength of them, and there is scriptural proof to us, witnesses to us that the family is the system that is been given to us that works the best. As believers, as social scientists, as atheists, we would say that the family proves to be the longest and healthiest way for humans to function.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're in the evaporation of the nation state, which is interesting because the nation state is an outgrowth of the family, and being subjects of Her Majesty, we don't have to go very far to realize that this is true. Okay, so the House of Windsor, and she is our sovereign as well. And the top tier royal family in Canada, we don't know the proper terms, but we know who they are. What kind of protection and what kind of role do they play in our constitutional monarchies that we both live in these times?
I have no idea.
Kate.
Now, as far as I'm aware, the Queen will usually stay out of political matters. They are supposed to remain neutral because, either left or right wing, depending on whether the democratic processes of our country, democratic, I say, I don't believe that we live in a democracy, but, the sort of pantomime democracy that we live in, she's not supposed to get involved. I mean, I do think that it's something that she does need to speak on personally, because I do think that the royal family is another institution that will come under attack. I mean, it already has with Meghan Markle, where people have tried to claim that the reason that she had to leave the royal family was because, people were mean to her because she's mixed race, and that has nothing to do with it. People didn't like her because she was a gold-digging narcissist that used her platform that she got from her husband to push a Marxist and harmful agenda that was divisive within our country, all the while treating our actual Queen and our future Queen Kate with contempt. And then she wonders why the British public didn't like her. But of course,
which is key. It's an attack on the family, and this is the royal family of our culture. Americans who watch this, they're not going to get it, right? But as Canadians and as UK citizens, so these are existential threats, to our way of life, right? Can we look to them? I don't know. She seems to have come out. The royal family spoke out on COVID, and they came out with some really, really, really good things, right? So
they do like to speak on crises because it's a morale thing. But when it's a taboo or divisive topic, no matter what she says, she's got to be representing all the people of the UK. And the globalists and Marxists, they've actually hijacked what is Britishness, because you can be anybody from anywhere with, your values, your culture, everything about you as a person is not British. You have no British heritage. You don't even like Britain. You're only coming here because you get given a free council house, free NHS, free schooling, free prescriptions, free welfare, and get treated better than the indigenous citizens are here. I mean, even if you're a known terrorist, you can still stay. It's absolutely ridiculous. But what we have is now a very multicultural country. So, the Queen can't offend British Pakistanis or British Black people, or she's got to, include all British people, no matter what their heritage is. But I feel that a lot of people that legally, they have British citizenship, they're not British. And I'm very angry that our government just hands it out as if it is nothing. They haven't earned it. And these aren't refugees. These are economic migrants. Like I've said, we've seen our own Navy and Coast Guard, the French Navy, shipping these people over from France. France is a safe country. It's not at war. Why do they need to come from there? The reason they want to come is either because A, they are militants that are planning to harm our people and our country, or they're coming here for the economic benefits of coming here.
Now, what about the Commonwealth of Nations? Are these
to appease these people?
No, I understand.
Because they're classed as British, so she can't actually offend anybody. So a topic like this, no matter what she says, she will offend.
Yeah, no. But we're also part of the Commonwealth of Nations. Now, are you telling me that these are people who've come from Commonwealth of Nations countries are doing this? These are people from other kind of countries.
Yeah, I mean, some of these will be coming from Commonwealth countries, but, it's like the UN Migration Pact that our current Home Secretary, Priti Patel, signed.
Yeah, but we're our own UN. We're our own UN. We're in the Commonwealth of Nations with Her Majesty as the sovereign of that.
Well, apparently this overrides it, and this allows people,
Shouldn't.
no matter what country or wherever they come from, mostly they want to import people from sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East, you know, a
Wouldn't it be
culture and
better?
people
Wouldn't
that
it be better to
have been
take the Chinese on? Wouldn't it be better?
yeah.
Don't you see the Chinese are playing our game?
Well, I do believe that I read something. I haven't managed to verify it, but it was in one of the mainstream newspapers. So that we will be taking on people from Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is, they're quite British. They didn't even, you know, they weren't happy with being signed over China, even with the one nation, two systems. They weren't happy about that.
They
And
want
with
to
the
look like a
recent
free
protests in
country.
Hong Kong, you know, I'm quite pleased about that, because even though they are going to be an extra weight in our country, you don't hear about Chinese people terrorizing, you know, going out and stabbing people to death, or, you know, targeting white British children to go and rape in mass like you do with the Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities. You know, up to 1 million white school children in Britain have been raped by these gangs, and our government and police have been complicit in covering it up. There's some real systematic racism for you. Anyway, but yes.
So that is it's very powerful, you know. And I just, before we end this segment, don't you think that as loyal subjects of Her Majesty, that we have a responsibility also to the Commonwealth nations, as we would rise up as a British heritage people and work within our own group? Like, if we have a problem with the UN, don't you think there's still value to that group?
Well, there's a lot of people who are trying to, right? But those people who are trying to are silenced, defamed, banned from their platforms. The government has them under threat of losing their children or their livelihood or their job or their dignity, right? A lot of people are afraid to stand up and do that when those kinds of things are at risk. You got a family to take care of, and you've got a job, and you want to keep up the lifestyle for your family. You can't speak out or stand up for your national sovereignty because you might lose your job for doing so. You're thinking about your family, right? And I think there's a lot of fear in people. And you know what? It's okay. It's okay to have fear. It's okay to be afraid. There's no such thing as bravery without the presence of fear, right? But what makes the difference between the courageous and those who are not courageous are those who stand up regardless of fear, and they face it head on, right? And that's what
Well,
people start doing. And I just
the
feel
thing
like
is
things just
people
haven't
don't
gotten quite to
realize.
the boiling points yet where, and I don't know how long it's going to be or what's going to take to push people to that point, right? And I'm
Well,
starting to get really nervous that people just aren't going to stand up and do it. They're just going to let our governments and these Marxists roll over us and tear down our statues, tear down our history, tear down our culture and our future, and destroy the futures of our children in the process. You know, I don't want to see my children growing up and living in gulags or being forced to wear veils or burqas or niqabs or anything like that. It's absolutely ridiculous the way we're taking our countries. People need to stand up. We need to do something about it.
Go ahead,
Quit
Kate.
sitting on your hands.
Well, it's true. I call it economic terrorism, and it's been going on for a very long time. It is, you know, this person says something that I disagree with. It's not illegal. We live in a democracy, but I don't agree with that opinion. Then I'm going to get a load of my friends and trolls to go harass their employer or harass their Facebook page. We're going to brand them a racist. I mean, I've tried to hold events where we've had the left threatening to behead employees of venues that are going to have us speak. You know, I've had friends whose businesses have been destroyed. I mean, I've been fired at least 3 times from projects. But, you know, some of them were quite understandable because, you know, they were EU funded, and then they found out that I was, you know, campaigning to leave the EU, and they saw it as a conflict of interest, which, to be fair, I can see why it is. But, you know, with other people, it has been very, very unfair. I mean, I would say that there has been political persecution on a mass scale that, like you say, has made people very afraid to speak. But I keep trying to explain this to people. You know, the more you show fear, the more they're going to take. And, you know, these things that you fear about losing, you know, your house, your job, they're coming for all that anyway. I mean, how long are your jobs going to last when the Marxists take over? And seen as if they're all screaming and calling for white genocide, do you think your kids are going to be safe? You know, I mean, in Great Britain, we've got a major problem, as in, you know, the white people in actually a minority in our own capital and in many towns and cities up and down the country. They face bullying, they face racial abuse, they get hunted down, stabbed, robbed, raped, and our media even refuse to report on it. Our police refuse to log it as hate crimes because we're white. And we are becoming a minority in our own country. We're being outbred, and people will say that's racist. Well, the thing is, we are in danger. Like these people, you might be teaching your kids to be tolerant. They're teaching their kids to behead yours. Like that's not a joke.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it because I want to be dramatic. These are the facts. And these people are calling for white genocide. And if you look at Britain, right, and you look at what's going on, and the anti-white racism, it's not anti-white racism. It's actually ethnic cleansing. That's what's going on. So if you look at the forms of ethnic cleansing, mass immigration, forced mass immigration, either moving the target group out of the territory or moving a hostile group into the territory, that is a form of ethnic cleansing, something that our own government has been participating in on a huge scale over the last few decades. I think we've had over 10 million immigrants come in less than 15 years. 10 million. Each one of them doesn't tend to work, you know, only about a good 15% actually come in and end up working, but they go on the benefit system that white people are paying for in their tax, and they can afford to sit there having 5, 6, 7 children sometimes, and all these kids are given special privileges because we have educational opportunities that are only open to black and ethnic minorities, excluding only white citizens. You know, there was a rich guy who understood, you know, that this is really unfair and offered to have a scholarship for white underprivileged boys that were bright, for them to be able to go to better private schools or good universities, and that was denied because it's racist. But it's okay to have ones for black kids, for Muslim kids. The only people that are not allowed to have anything exclusively for them are white children. That is a form of not just systematic racism, it's ethnic cleansing. They make it more difficult for us, like I say, economically, to have children. The immigrants and the BME community, or Black, Asian, and ethnic minorities, they're always given priority when it comes to social housing. They get given more payments in welfare, you know, higher payments. They're incentivized not to work so that white people can carry on paying their taxes, and, you know, they can carry on breeding whilst they're all plotting to kill us. I mean, they've actually found stashes, you know, hundreds of thousands of guns stored underneath mosques in Britain, and those mosques are still functioning. They just arrest 1 or 2 of these extremists, and then they're out within a couple of years after they've gone on an anti-extremism course, and they're let loose in the British public again. You know, and that's why we're seeing so much terrorism. It's really sorry, Kat.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Your conversation just makes me think of you know, the greater you know, population shifting that's
there is
going
even
on.
employment opportunities that are only open to black and ethnic minorities, only excluding white, indigenous, British citizens. You go on Google, you look up BME jobs UK, there's loads of them. But if any suggestion, can you imagine even one employer saying, no, we only want to hire a white person? It would be front page news and we would not stop hearing about it. I mean, it would be dragged up 10 years later. Oh, look at this racist thing. But it can go on every single day on a mass scale against white people. Nobody says a thing. So that's employment, that's education, that's mass forced immigration.
Okay, we're going into another section. We got to end part 1. Do you mind?
Sorry.
Do you want to end? We're going to end part 1, and then just come back on, and we'll continue. So we're ending part 1 of this week's The People's Voice with Adam Stevenson, conservative commentator, and his guest, Kate Paris, Bubba Kate Paris.
Thank you. 1 second. But a film, I'll have to get the name of it, and it was about people hunting other people. One of the lines in the film, it says, "Who would even do something so horrible?" And they went, "White people," and they went, "Oh yeah, they're the worst." Now, can you imagine if that had been any other way around? Like, oh, black people, oh yeah, they're the worst. Can you imagine how badly it would kick off? But because it's white people, it's perfectly okay. And, you know, what's going on is what I call tactics of dark psychology. And like Stephen was saying, it is a systematic program of drip feeding. It's almost like boiling the frog in the pan, where you heat it slowly so it doesn't realize that it's dying. And they do exactly the same thing, where they slowly poison a society against one particular group. But what's astonishing here is they've actually poisoned white people against themselves. You know, they've actually made them believe that they are terrible and that they deserve what is happening to them, which is insane. You know,
wouldn't it be our own, as a people who has lived through history and rose to the point of in various forms to be, governors of the world, right? And we got there in a long, intelligent but violent and self-centered way to get to the top. And that's just the way it was. There was no one coming to rescue anybody. When you talk about the Saxon arrival onto the Anglo and then formation of the Anglo-Saxon people and everything that's gone on from there, right? I think that now that we're here, we don't want to be those people. We know we know where, but we've got this unique problem. We got here that way.
Not necessarily. We fought very hard to keep European lands. They were under Islamic conquest for centuries.
I understand. Right? I'm not saying the history is either bad or good.
Right? There used to be an Islamic slave trade where they were kidnapping European men, women, and children by the millions. Okay, we're not talking a couple 100,000 like what happened in the United States. And slavery is universal across every single culture in human history. What is unique about Western Judeo-Christian culture, American and British culture, is that we were the first to abolish slavery, and you never hear about that. We were the first ones to get rid of it. And all people try to do is tear us down about it. But they're not talking about the slavery that's happening in Africa and the Islamic slave trade that's happening there. Right now, to this day, they're selling black slaves on open slave markets. The photos are there, the videos are there, the evidence is there. And the entire world and the United Nations is in absolute denial of it. It's despicable. Tell me we got that rant on tape.
Oh yeah, and the thing is instinctively as British and Canadian people, we're kind. Like honestly, if someone came to your house and gently 2:00 in the morning and just gently knocked, and you looked out the window and it seemed safe, and they opened the door and it says, "You know what? I'm thirsty, and I could have a sandwich." You'd get them one.
Yeah.
Right.
We've been too
and
nice
that's who we are.
We've had it too easy for too long.
But right? So how do we change? How do we deal with this?
People
stuff?
Make hard times make strong people, and then the cycle continues. Strong people make good times, and then the good times make people weak, and then weak people.
You think
and it's just a continuous cycle and never stops.
Let's talk. Like Kate, you got a great perspective, and we gave you a little bit of a Canadian crisscross here. But what do you think about what we were talking about?
I think that it is actually, ingrained in British and Canadian cultures to be polite, and it's actually a very Christian thing. It's treating others how you would like to be treated. I mean, what people are very unaware of is that most people in Britain never actually saw slaves. There was very few slaves ever brought to Britain, and the way the propaganda was given to us, and understandably in some ways at the time, and I don't mean this in a racist way, but if you came from a very advanced culture compared to, let's say Africa, that was still hundreds of years behind. I mean, from my knowledge, they were still living in architecture that consisted of mud huts, and their weaponry consisted of spears and some bows and arrows. But, we had ships, and we had great cathedrals, we had roads and sewers and ships and navies and guns, which is one of the primary reasons why the slave trade started, was because the Africans wanted these inventions, and they said, here, we don't have anything else. We have some captured people from our tribal warfare. You take these. And that's how white people actually got involved in slavery. It was Africans that wanted to trade with us. We didn't go in there and, kidnap any Africans. That's not what we did. We went there and we were trading with them, and they didn't have a lot to trade. And slavery was quite normal in Africa, and enslaving people. They were forever enslaving each other in their tribal warfare. Except for now, these people could be sold, and they could buy weapons, and then they could capture more people and sell them. So, I would say it became almost like a very negative cycle, because once, you know, certain tribes became more powerful, they basically just started selling more slaves because it was very profitable to them. And very wrongly, some British people, and we still have British people like this today, but they are in the minority, saw it as an opportunity to make an awful lot of money. But like you say, there was white slaves in Africa, the Barbary slave trade, where they used to sail from Morocco, and they even actually took over a couple of islands in the British Channel, and particularly Cornwall was hit hard, where they used to go on land and they'd kidnap people from villages and they'd go and sell them to the Ottoman Muslim Empire, where they become white slaves. And there was many, many more white British slaves in Africa than there ever was African slaves in America or in any of the British colonies. And there were still white slaves in the Ottoman Empire well after the British ended slavery for the black people.
Yeah. And the same
On
thing
top of that,
happened
the
sort of,
British people
right?
have been paying in tax until 2000. You know, when they talk about reparations, the British people have paid you reparations. You know, we paid for your freedom, not only in wars with our sweat and our blood and our sacrifice and our suffering to free you, but also financially out of our pockets. We've actually still been paying that off until 2014, but yet we're demonized as the worst, even though we never started the slave trade. We're in it for the least amount of time, have been enslaved ourselves, and we're the only people that decided to stop it, the first people that decided to stop it on a humane basis, and we forced the rest of the world to give it up. And it is only still in African and Middle Eastern and Arab countries where slavery is still predominant today. But yet we're still seen as the bad guys. And that comes from the media and the perspective that they've been putting forward, because like we say, they wish to have a Marxist coup of our countries and dismantling and disrupting racial, how could you put it, racial joins and unity, which in some cases is impossible. And it's not about race, it's more about ideology when it comes to some of these things, particularly with the Islamic ideology, because never once in history, not once in the entire of human history, have you had two ideologies that fundamentally at their core are opposed, that ever live side by side peacefully. You know, it always ends up with one dominating the other. And with us being the tolerant, let's be nice, let's be kind, let's, you know, be pleasant to everybody, you know, let's treat people how we want to be treated. They're not thinking like that. They're thinking, let's kill the infidel, let's rape the white woman, let's rape the kids, let's behead the men, and let's throw the gays off the buildings, and let's bring in Sharia law and take things over. And they're teaching their kids this kind of violence as well. So who ends up being the more dominant one?
Exactly.
And it's not wrong for us to say that,
right?
It's not wrong for us to say that we have a right to defend our people, our country, our culture, our history, our heritage. We have a right to defend these things. I mean, we had the kindness to open our doors and offer a better life to these people, and yet they bite the hand that feeds them and treat our kindness as weakness, and go on to just abuse us. So, you know, if people are talking about repatriation, it's not that we don't care about black lives, it's that we care about British lives, and you've put them in danger. We opened our doors to you and you abuse that. See, now you need to leave, in my opinion. You know, and I don't think that that's a racist point of view. I think that's, you've been given a chance and you've proven that you're not integrating. In fact, you're violently trying to subvert and take over our country, and are participating in acts of ethnic cleansing, particularly with the rape of over 1 million British schoolgirls by gangs of Muslim men, which for some reason, you know, gets hardly any media coverage at all. For some reason, you know, a career criminal who, you know, I don't believe it was right the way that George Floyd died, but, you know, he wasn't a nice man, he wasn't a martyr, he wasn't even a changed man. At the time of his arrest, he was high on methamphetamine and fentanyl and was committing a fraudulent crime. I mean, okay, he wasn't actually resisting, but, you know, he wasn't a saint. Yeah, everybody only sees the good sides of what he's done. Yeah, it's like when we want to talk about any sort of racial attack on British people, we're not even allowed to speak about it. We're not allowed to call for justice. And any suggestion that race may have been a motivation or religion may have been a motivation, you're automatically shot down as a racist, even though, you know, by statistical fact and just reading through each one of these ideologies, it makes it quite clear that that is the primary motivation. And I think British people are too tolerant and they're too nice. And like you say, it's very hard to get out of some people. And you know, Stephen said, hard times make hard people. And I probably have slightly less empathy and less compassion because, you know, I've done those hard times and I've seen what these people are up close. And, you know, and that's why I worry for my country, because they don't see through it. And I really do. And I understand the danger that they're in. It's one of the reasons why I don't fear speaking, because I know that all these things that they're so worried about, like their jobs and their safety and their houses, you know, none of this is safe if you keep letting them erode your liberty and rights, even your right to defend yourself. I mean, in the United States, I don't know whether it's the same in Canada, you can bear arms. Here, you can't. So only the criminals and the terrorists have weapons. The government have basically made us sitting ducks.
Yeah,
And
definitely, right.
you know, I want to ask you a question. We'll start with you, Adam. And you talked about a little bit about it, Kate, and it's this somehow, as us, as you know, white people, we've got this self-doubt, right? That when we started the conversation with patriotism, right, which I think replaces that self-doubt. But how did you feel comfortable, Adam, coming to the realization that it's okay to be a you know, a white male dad, working man in Canada?
Not really quite sure exactly what you mean by that, but I'll try to respond as the best I can. I see a lot of issues with things like this. One example I can give is in the UK. This is something that happened in the UK, right? But it's the same sort of thing here. Somebody flew a banner from an airplane that said "White Lives Matter" over a soccer match, and it said "White Lives Matter Burnley," and Burnley is a soccer team in the UK, I believe. And you know, people said that it was racist. Well, that's a little bit massively hypocritical when it's okay to say that for one side, but you can't say it for the other. You know, people are told that it's racist to say all lives matter. People are told that it's racist to say blue lives matter, right? And these Black Lives Matter organizations, they want to say, oh, Black Lives Matter, but then they protest about that one guy, George Floyd, when that happened, right? And okay, it wasn't a good thing. But then Officer David Dorn was killed. Where were they to protest about his life? He was a black police officer and he was killed by Black Lives Matter protests. What about the multiple people being beaten and robbed in the streets by these guys? What about those who lost their shops, right? There were black owned businesses that were burnt to the ground. They're not protesting about that. They're not protesting for the blacks that are being sold in open slave markets in Africa. They're not protesting about the 20 million black children who have been killed by way of abortion since Roe v. Wade was instilled. That has been the most defining decimator of the black population in the United States. But you don't hear them talking about that. And why not? Because they're trying to push their social Marxist agenda. The leader of Black Lives Matter on video saying we are trained Marxists. And what have they done in other Marxist takeovers? Take the Bolshevik Revolution, for example. They were censoring speech. They were tearing down statues. They were taking away people's children. They were taking away people's jobs and livelihoods, right? Same thing happened in Russia. Same thing happened in China under Mao Zedong in the Great Leap Forward. It's just over and over and over again. If you watch history and you watch the patterns of the things that happened, you can see exactly what is going on right now. And it's terrifying. They want to tear down Winston Churchill's statue. Winston Churchill defeated Hitler. He was the greatest racist of all time, and Hitler defeated him. Black Lives Matter wants to tear down his statue. That makes no sense. Another indicator is the Abraham Lincoln memorials that were defaced and destroyed. This guy literally ended slavery. He penned the Emancipation Proclamation. Black Lives Matter and Antifa want to destroy and tear down his statue. Ulysses S. Grant, they tore down his statue. This guy fought in the Civil War. He was like the chief general under Abraham Lincoln, who fought for the abolition of slavery. He was a definer in the abolition of slavery. And afterwards, he fought vigorously against the Ku Klux Klan. And they want Black Lives Matter and Antifa want to tear down his statue. If Black Lives Matter to these guys, why are they tearing down the heroes that ended their oppression? That makes no sense. And that is the strongest indicator that this is not about racism. This is not about their lives mattering. This is about an ideological, social Marxist takeover where they're tearing down our statues, they're tearing down our history, they're tearing down our culture, and in the process, they're tearing down our future. Because we can't move forward in the future unless we learn from and seek inspiration from the heroes in our past.
So, Kate, average, white Canadians, right, and people in the UK, we don't want to be racist. We don't want to be supremacist. No, I know, but we have this self-doubt, right, about our race. And you know what? We just tumbled into this world. Like, I'm a 57-year-old man. I'm a middle-aged man. Right? It's like I carry the mistakes of middle-aged men for 8 millennia. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, we all tumbled here, right? But still, right? How do we?
Every civilization does. If we're to say that about our civilization, then we should be saying that about other civilizations too. What about the Islamic conquest, where they enslaved millions, or the bombings, or the rapes, or the killings, or any of these things? Yeah. And they're not coming after those cultures and saying, "Oh, we need to tear down their statues. We need to tear down their." Antifa and Black Lives Matter are calling for the burning down and destruction of churches because they're a symbol of white supremacy. But you don't see them going and doing calling for these things about mosques when they're when we see these issues in Islam, right? It's only when it comes to our civilization.
Okay, so
the history of other civilizations and cultures doing the exact same thing on a far grander, on a far more violent, on a far more torturous scale is completely ignored. And I think that's where the main problem lies, right? And it's not that we're racist or whatever, because we want to preserve our civilization. We want to preserve our traditional values. We want to preserve our culture. But you get what I'm saying, right?
I do. And I want to ask Kate something.
And it's perfectly okay.
I want to ask Kate something. So how do we make that change from being self-doubting to self-realized, but not going or to the extreme where you want to act out and blame? You just want to come to that realization that white lives do matter, I guess, or my life matters, and I just happen to be white. I don't know. How do we look at that?
We could stop tearing down and feminizing men.
Okay, I want Kate to
masculinity and give our men some balls back to stand up for their culture and their values and what they believe in.
Sure,
right?
Sure. Let's hear from Kate.
Well, it's very difficult because, like you say, there's sort of white guilt or feeling like you shouldn't speak on these topics. Even if you don't have fear, you almost feel like, that you don't have a right to talk on it because you're known as the oppressor. But this is what I mean about dark psychology and the way that these tactics work. I mean, I don't think people are very aware of that area of psychology and how it's implemented in things like behavioral models and, purposeful reactions. I do understand how it works very well. But how we go on to combat it is, this is one of the issues. Most people that go on to speak about this are, they do get pushed to extremes. And I can understand why they do, because if you're surrounded by extremism against yourself on a daily basis, and this is why Black Lives Matter feel so passionately about the cause that they do, that they're so blinded that that they're being used in the same way that you get right-wing extremists, is that The same with in science, where you get, you know, a strong force going in one direction, you're always going to get an equal and opposing force. It's the same within politics, if you will, if you live in a kind of democracy. So when you have an extreme left wing, you're always going to have an extreme right wing. And most people actually sit in the middle of that bell curve. So they don't want to listen to either side of that. Unfortunately, it tends to be those extremes that get into power. So the middle ground doesn't really get there. The problem that I have is that, you know, I could put forward a very reasonable argument that could be quite balanced, and it will still be seen as extreme and racist. And I think that's the problem that we have. And I think that we've got to appeal to white people, but not only white people, but people of all races that are in Britain, that have British values, you know, that do believe in freedom of speech, that do believe in equality, especially equality before the law and employment rights, and don't believe in short lists or, you know, quotas and things that give people racial privilege, because that should be unfair. I think that what we do is we actually get more people aware and educated to the reality, but try and do it in a moderate manner. But it's so difficult to do when even moderation is seen as extreme these days. I mean, I've probably taken the stance now. Like I said, I left the Tory party because I realized, like, there is no way that I could be vocal on these topics without getting kicked out of the party. So I just thought, well, I value my freedom of speech too much. And to be honest, being involved in political organizations that hinder me from being able to talk about the truth isn't beneficial for me or the country. So, you know, I wish to put together a group of intellectuals that are going to be able to override different areas of what you could call neo-Marxism or cultural Marxism, and some of it will be to do with education, but obviously I'm going to need secure digital servers and communication to be able to do so, because, you know, people are targeted and their jobs are targeted, so I could only get people to do things for me quite covertly at this time until I can get a reasonable enough, as I'm aware of, following that I can put pressure on the government to start changing these things. Because in the two-way system that Britain works, in a first past the post, you're only ever going to get Labour and Conservative elected. But like what we did with UKIP is we stole enough votes from the establishment that they had to start adopting some of our policies. In fact, we basically, you know, UKIP bullied David Cameron into holding the EU referendum. Otherwise, we never would have left the European Union. It was the same with the Brexit Party. When UKIP started to be more vocal about the, you know, Islamification of the UK, particularly with the cover-ups of the grooming gangs and the terrorism and the forced migration, and the fact that our government do very little to do anything about the hate speech and violence that is promoted inside of our mosques. They do very little about the hate crime that's perpetrated against people. In fact, they actively hinder our rights to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, even go so far as to actually, you know, take away parts of your liberties, you know, imprison you for a certain amount of time if you continue to speak out about these things. And I can understand that people are fearful. And I'm lucky in a way that, you know, Stephen said before that, you know, there has to be a certain amount of fear to have courage. I'm not brave, trust me. I just have what you'd call a very limited emotional range. I don't really feel fear anymore. I do have what you call an adrenal system, but when it comes to this kind of fear, I mean, I don't know if you know much about my history. I won't go into it today, but it's definitely, you know, put me in the mindset of you can't show weakness to these people. You really can't, because I know how they treat you if you do. So the more that they try and attack me and my people, the more vocal that I'm going to become. And the more people see that strength, I believe more people will start to do the same. But there has to be assurances that they're not going to be economically terrorized, because their livelihoods are important. They have mortgages to pay for, they have kids to look after. If they lose their house, they could lose their kids. You know, and they might not be able to get another job, because once the left wing has branded you a racist, companies are very wary of hiring you because of the, you know, systematic harassment and abuse that those private companies get. But all we need is to actually get our police force to start acting in a correct manner. Now, as I've always said to people, What people don't understand is what you see in the media, it's not correct. You know, we saw this with Trump winning in 2016 and Britain voting to leave the European Union, and then last year in our landslide victory when I was in the Conservative Party, where the British people voted in mass for the Conservatives and wiped out Labour in many of their safe seats. The media was all saying before that, oh, well, Trump's not going to win and Brexit's not going to happen. And well, they were wrong, because they're speaking for an extremist minority. And what they broadcast on the mainstream media is actually a very narrow view of what the country believes in, because they know that people are prone to follow the crowd. If they believe that that's what everybody's thinking and they're going to be treated badly if they don't join in, it makes people join in. So all I need to do is start creating platforms, start creating people, finding the talent out there that I need in different areas, and ensuring that they get the support that they need. It's really not that difficult to do. The only difficulty that I have is trust, and the fact that a lot of people in Britain, you know, the patriotic groups, many people know each other and they have a lot of internal spats that are rather, you know, I would say pathetic considering the situation that we're in, and they need to put it all to one side. But I think that they need a strong, rational, reasonable voice that can put things forward that isn't in a racist manner, but also is not going to be self-deprecating, and I'm not going to badmouth our race, our culture, or anything else. And that's what our people are going to require, are people that's going to do that, that are not going to show fear. I mean, we've even got politicians and police officers kneeling to these Marxist terrorists. And with people, like you say, they'll go after their livelihoods and everything. You can go after what you want with me. I know it ends in violence. You can threaten violence with me. Nothing's really going to shut me up. And other people are going to follow in suit. And in a way, Black Lives Matter is almost like a situation where you give them enough rope to hang themselves. You know, that silent majority that are usually very centrist, and you're not usually that angered, and they're very, very tolerant. You keep watching Black Lives Matter tear down their statues, call them racist, keep going on with their violent attacks. You know, quite moderate people will shift towards the right, and you will see many more extremist right-wing groups start arising. And if the government tries to push them back or tries to demonize them in some manner, they will go underground. Britain will not be defeated, I can guarantee you that, and the Marxists are not going to take over. And the people that are involving themselves in this coup right now, or even, you know, I would say supporting it, even in a remote manner, you know, they're going to live to regret it. Because even if it does work out for them, did they like during the pandemic queuing up for one loaf of bread? Because that's a Marxist reality. That's what you'll be living in. So I don't know what it will take for Britain to wake up. You know, I thought when they heard about hundreds of thousands to 1 million British schoolgirls being raped, tortured, and in some cases murdered for being white, and, you know, families that had gone to the police. I heard stories of dads that they knew that their little girls were out there being gang raped by multiple men, and they'd been to the police multiple times and begged them for help, and the police would do nothing. They'd even gone out looking for their daughters, banging on the doors of where their daughters are being raped, and the police have arrested them for going looking for their daughters. I thought that would wake people up. You know, there were 6 people stabbed in Glasgow today by another Islamic militant posing as a refugee. And will it get much news coverage? No, we'll probably be talking about George Floyd again tomorrow, won't we? What about the 3 white gay men that were stabbed in Reading? What about Emily Jones, the 7-year-old little white child that had her head cut off in a park in Bolton? Where was her protests? Hey, where was her justice for Emily? You know, there is none of that, and it's because the victims are white. And I thought that should be enough to wake people up, but it appears it's not. And maybe that's because they've yet to hear a rational voice, and any rational voice that starts speaking about it basically gets silenced. If you go into a political party like the Conservatives or anything like that, if you speak the way I do, you'll get deselected. They will not let you stand for seats.
The same thing here.
All.
Right?
You know, if you talk about these things and they find out where you work, they will target your employer, and they will continually do it until you lose your job. If they find out where you live, they might attack you outside your home. I get death threats on a regular basis. As for elections, they could definitely find my address. I don't care, because if you don't stand up and do something now, it only gets worse. And that's what British people need to understand is I've tried explaining to them, look up the definition of ethnic cleansing, just go on Wikipedia, and it will state all the different things that happen when a target group is being ethnically cleansed. And all of these things, apart from the mass murderous genocide of white Indigenous British citizens, has happened. Every single one of the acts of ethnic cleansing, which are the recognized international, actions of ethnic cleansing, are happening today in Britain against white people, and yet it's still not enough to wake them up. And what I think will, possibly help is this Black Lives Matter movement. I was wondering when the lefties were going to lose the plot enough to start acting as extreme as they were. But even though I know that our government was corrupt, I didn't think they could get away with this level of corruption. However, it is waking people up. But like I say, that the silent, fearful majority. And that's why I need secure servers, because I could probably get a lot of people that would agree to what I'm saying and sign petitions, but they don't want their names ending up public. They don't want to be hacked by Antifa, or me being hacked by Antifa and their details getting out there. So there's a long slog ahead of us. However, I do think that this Black Lives Matter thing will frizzle out. The things that they're asking for are ridiculous and can't be implemented. I mean, actually, in some manner, the mayor of London has just announced a £110 million cut to the Metropolitan Police, London's main police force. Don't know how he has the right to do that. So Black Lives Matter have kind of got their way there, even though London has become one of the most violent Western civilized countries in the world. It well overshadows New York now for its murder rate. We have acid attacks, we have gang rapes, we have muggings, we have stabbings, we have shootings, and they're on a daily and weekly basis. But yeah, we're going to defund the police. But when people see, like with Chaz, how ridiculous these things are when they're implemented and how damaging and dangerous they are, they will all start to realize that things that the people that they labeled as extremists were actually being quite moderate, and everything that we were saying was true. So I'm quite happy for Black Lives Matter in some ways to continue getting more extreme, because it will wake people up. And at this point, we actually are still in a majority. So it's better now than 10 years down the line where we wouldn't be. All I need now is really for I would say people that respect Britain, its culture, its heritage, its people, and want to integrate and be British, really British, and then yes, you should join in and we should all work together. And I think, like you said, I think the Commonwealth, because we all have British values and we all have a lot in common. We still have the same Queen, and like you say, our values and even our culture is so similar, and we're all under attack. So I would say an organisation should be implemented where we work together on a bilateral basis and transnational basis, where we come up with ideas and strategies, because after all, it's a global problem that we're dealing with, where we can all work together. I think America, in particular, because of Donald Trump, I get a lot of content from America, particularly with Black conservatives there, that are calling out Black Lives Matter and the Democrat Party for what they are. And I think that helps, because at the moment, people, white people aren't allowed to speak. We're not allowed an opinion. But if other people that don't want to end up living under an Islamic, Marxist, tyrannical, one world, horrific life that, will be imposed on them if they continue going down this road, should all join together. And when other Black people or mixed race people, for instance, they speak up, I mean, how do you even consolidate it? I've got a lot of mixed race friends and they're absolutely disgusted by Black Lives Matter. Yeah. The white people in their family don't matter less than the Black people in their family, and the white people in their family are certainly not more privileged than the Black people in their family. They know that. And because they have both Black and white family. Yeah. So we need to start appealing to these people. We need to get them speaking, because white people are not allowed to. And I think that the freedom of speech that America still has, and possibly Canadians might have a bit more than what we have in Britain, we need you speaking for us. And I would like for Britons to be able to speak for themselves, but in many ways we can't. But the more people that do speak up and do point this out and speak about the facts and are brave enough to do so, the more people will become less afraid to do so themselves. And that's the only way that we combat it.
Excellent. Adam, last word to you.
I 100% agree with her. And then, you know, when these voices such as Candace Owens or some of the other ones speak out, the leftists within the BLM Antifa movement immediately come out and start calling them Uncle Toms, or they call them, I've even heard of them calling them white supremacists, which is really quite funny. I'm not quite sure how you call Candace Owens a white supremacist, or Ben Shapiro, for example. He's Jewish, right?
And the Hodge twins.
Right, exactly. And you know, I think a lot of what people fail to notice is that the entire free world has been built on the Ten Commandments and this sort of Judeo-Christian value system. And the more we chip away at that, and the more we drift away from it, and the more we chip away at the underpinnings and the foundations of our society, the further and further we descend into chaos. And we're witnessing the fruits of that right now. Look what's happening in the streets. Our statues are being torn down. People are lighting fires on a massive scale. People are throwing fire bombs at police. People are attacking police. In the UK the other day, I saw a video. There was thousands of people partying and fighting in the street, and the police tried to break it up, and all these people just pushed back, and they basically just told the cops, get out of here. Police were getting attacked and shoved out of the area. It was absolutely insane. And then you see these things like what's happening in Seattle with the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, and then in Washington with the Black House Autonomous Zone. We now have an autonomous zone in Toronto, in Canada.
Oh my goodness.
This is nuts. This is unprecedented. When you see radical groups carving out pieces of territory within sovereign states, that is, by definition, domestic terrorism. And these groups were armed. They did it with weapons and with force, and they attacked the police and pushed them out of the precinct and out of the area. This is domestic terrorism, and it needs to be treated as such. And something absolutely needs to be done about this. We can't just sit back and watch this happen. This is not okay. And if the police don't step in, if our militaries don't step in, what's left? You know, and I don't want to be the person that says, okay, citizens need to go do something about this. I'm hoping that our police and our military will step in and do something about it, so citizens aren't left with no other option. Right? Because we shouldn't have to. It's our government's responsibility to protect our sovereignty, to protect our freedoms and values,
it's a primary purpose.
And our safety and the future of our children, but they're not doing it.
Adam Stevenson, the conservative commentator, host of the People's on TVU.
God bless.
And special thanks to his guest. It was such a good time to have you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bubba Kate Paris, you know, I think that it was, you know, you're very intelligent, you're very pragmatic, and you're a patriot, and
Thank you.
You're for all people of good values, and it's an honor to meet you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and an honor being on the show. And yes, hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Yes.
Yeah, possibly. Maybe
Thank you very much.
Daughter to come on next time too.